Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, what's next for the impeachment process? Public hearings wrap up as President Trump meets with Republicans over what comes next.
Those plans that I had talked with my friends, all that fantasy, that just crystallized. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm either going to go to my school or I'm going to go to the food court at the mall.
A man who at one time almost became a mass shooter speaks to KPBS about why he almost did it and what stopped him. Questions about horse safety draw a big crowd. The state looks at what can be done after more deaths at Del Mar. And what drives people to drink? Local scientists look to drunk mice to study the effects of alcohol. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. It's Thursday, November 21st. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Maya Trabulsi. For a sixth day, the nation watched impeachment hearings into President Trump's conduct with Ukraine. It included a staffer at the U.S. Embassy who overheard a pivotal call with the president.
Ambassador Sondland agreed that the president did not give an expletive about Ukraine. I asked why not. And Ambassador Sondland stated that the president only cares about big stuff. I noted there was big stuff going on in Ukraine, like a war with Russia. And Ambassador Sondland replied that he meant big stuff that benefits the president, like the Biden investigation that Mr. Giuliani was pushing.
This afternoon, President Trump met with Republican senators to discuss strategy about a trial should the House vote for impeachment in the coming weeks. Steve Nanis has more on today's testimony.
Two new witnesses offering new details in the ongoing impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump. Fiona Hill, a former top Russia advisor for the White House, pushing back on a claim made by some Republicans that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that interfered in the 2016 election.
This is a fictional narrative that has been perpetrated and propagated by the Russian security services themselves.
She also urged lawmakers to be prepared for similar action from Russians in the next election.
We are running out of time to stop them.
Also testifying before the House Intelligence Committee, David Holmes, counselor for political affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine.
The president's voice was loud and recognizable.
Holmes testified that he heard a call between Trump and Ambassador to the European Union Gordon Sondland. According to Holmes, Trump asked Sondland about whether Ukraine will investigate his political opponents.
I then heard President Trump ask, so he's going to do the investigation. Ambassador Sondland replied that he's going to do it, adding that President Zelensky will do anything you ask him to do.
Thursday's hearing the latest in a busy week on Capitol Hill. On Wednesday, Ambassador Sondland testified that the White House conditioned aid to Ukraine on carrying out political investigations. The president has denied any wrongdoing and maintains that the entire impeachment inquiry is politically motivated. In Washington, Steve Nanis, KPBS News.
And here's what's next. There are no additional public hearings scheduled. The Intelligence Committee will review all the testimony and send it along to the Judiciary Committee, which could bring formal articles of impeachment. We have more coverage on all of this right now at kpbs.org. More today from President Trump on Eddie Gallagher case. He's speaking out against an upcoming review of Gallagher's status with the Navy SEALs. The Navy is reviewing whether Gallagher and 3 other SEALs will be removed from special operations. Gallagher was reduced in rank for being convicted of posing with a corpse while serving in Iraq. Last week, President Trump restored his rank. Today, he tweeted, "Gallagher will not lose his trident." Gallagher's lawyers say removing his SEAL designation would amount to retaliation by the Navy. Late this afternoon, the Navy put out a statement saying, "We are aware of the president's tweet and we are awaiting further guidance." The fall storm is expected to wrap up tonight. The National Weather Service says communities like Rancho Bernardo, Escondido, and Julian received more than 2 inches of rain. There were some issues closer to the coast. Overnight clogged drains caused flooding at UC San Diego. Some rocks also came loose and slid onto a campus street. We're expecting dry weather and a warm up this weekend. Our forecast is coming up a bit later in the show. And the weather forced Del Mar to cancel its races today, but the ongoing issue of horse safety is the focus today for those who regulate the sport. More now from KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman.
Tensions boiled over during a packed California Horse Racing Board meeting.
Excuse me. Just let him finish. It's not a cover-up.
Let people speak.
You can speak in item number 27.
People waited hours to speak about a proposal to severely limit the use of whips during races, but the board that regulates horse racing decided to postpone the vote.
And if we go through do something that nobody else is doing, and then it's going to cost a lot to the industry, and it's going to cost a lot of revenue to the state of California.
The board will now address the hot button issue next month.
Problem with this, from many of us, including myself, is that we don't really know what the right answer is.
37 horses have died in less than a year at Santa Anita Park near Los Angeles. Regulators are getting more pressure from Sacramento to increase safety as horse racing deaths continue.
I think we do want to see substantial reduction in injuries and fatalities sooner rather than later.
The governor is watching closely and wants the board to consider more than a dozen initiatives to reduce horse deaths.
I think, we are coming to a point where we think that, again, the goal should be 0 deaths. Whether or not we can get there or not, different question.
The board did move to make permanent rules allowing officials to stop horse racing at any time. And despite the deaths at Santa Anita, the board said horse racing can resume there next month.
We're doing the visuals because we think it's important.
Activists were at Thursday's meeting. They want racing to stop completely and say the board is protecting tracks like Santa Anita.
This never-ending, let's make it look like we're doing something, but let's not actually do anything.
Del Mar Thoroughbred Club CEO Joe Harper says he supports moves like restricting whips to make the game safer.
I think with these new safety regulations, the game might get much better. Let's face it. Our attendance is down because of the problems.
4 horses have died after racing or training in Del Mar this fall. Activists say they won't stop protesting until racing is stopped.
We're going to keep coming back.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
And also in North County, a focus on homelessness. The Encinitas City Council has voted to make a safe parking lot for people living out of their cars. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar has the story.
Jewish Family Services will operate another safe parking lot for people living out of their cars.
It's way more than parking. It's truly wraparound services with one goal, and that's to get individuals and families that are in our parking lot back into housing. And so it could be everything from employment to working with them on housing navigation, food, just a variety of services, mental health services.
City Council voted 4-1 to move forward with the plan to open the lot by the end of the year on the Leachtag Foundation's property in the northeast part of town. The parking lot will have space for 25 vehicles. It'll be open from 6 p.m. to 7 in the morning and have bathrooms and security. Dozens of Encinitas residents showed up to the City Council meeting to give their opinion on the lot.
I don't mind probably getting help for the people, but at that location, I think there's a lot of issues.
This will be the 4th lot that Jewish Family Services operates. The other 3 are in the city of San Diego. Jewish Family Services says on any given night, the 3 lots have about 300 vehicles.
When somebody finds themselves homeless and living in their car, the good news is they still have their car, they still have an asset, they still are able to go to work, they're still able to access resource. And so we want to stop the cycle of somebody falling into chronic homelessness. What we've come to understand is that when somebody is in their car, we're successful in getting people back into housing.
An estimated 350 people live out of their cars in North County. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
New details on last week's school shooting near L.A. The L.A. County Sheriff says the teenage shooter used what's called a ghost gun. That means the weapon was impossible to track due to it being assembled from separately purchased parts. 2 students were killed last week at Saugus High School in Santa Clarita. 3 others were wounded.
You can buy them online, and they're also known as an 80% gun. So 80% of it is assembled already. You get the additional 20%, and they're sold as a kit. And then you can legally buy it, assemble the weapon yourself, and then you have a gun that is not registered and no one knows that you have it.
And investigators say they still don't have a motive for the shooting. The killer ended up taking his own life. Aaron Stark is a man who kept a dark secret for 25 years. His secret? He almost became a mass shooter. On a Facebook post a year ago, he let the world know his deep, dark thoughts. And now, together with a local filmmaker, Johnny Santana, they're spreading the message that there is hope within everyone. Here is our interview. Well, welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Let's start from how this story came to be told.
So the day after the Stoneman Douglas disaster last year, that terrible massacre, I was having a tearful discussion with my wife and my oldest daughter about how could someone ever get to that point? How could you ever feel like you wanted to hurt that many people? And sadly, I do know how that feels. So I went to the back of the house and I wrote a simple Facebook post. And in it, I just said I was almost a school shooter. And I laid out a brief synopsis of my story, and by the next morning, that had caught Facebook viral, and it had a couple 100,000 likes and shares. And so my wife said, well, maybe someone else might want to hear this. And so I sent it to the local NBC affiliate in Denver, and that video just blew up, got like 17 million views.
So this was a year ago, but you had been living with this thought for 25 years.
Yeah. I had always thought that it was that I was the villain, that if anybody ever found out about my real life, that I would be the villain in everybody's story, that everybody would hate me.
Take us back there to the boy who was in so much pain.
So I grew up in a really, really violent household. I described my first couple years of life like living in a Stephen King movie. I was constantly the new kid, constantly getting bullied and picked on. Every school I went to, there was a new set of bullies. And I was fat, I was smelly, I read comic books, I was sensitive. I was just picked on by everybody. And I started to adapt that I'm the monster, I'm the broken one. I'd been screaming out my entire life and nobody heard me. I felt my whole life like if I walked out of a room, people would forget that I was there. Like I was just invisible. And I was gonna make them hear me now. So all those plans that I had talked with my friends, all that fantasy, that just crystallized. I know exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm either gonna go to my school or I'm gonna go to the food court at the mall. And the only difference that is the time of the day, of what time I was gonna get the gun. And I knew where to get a gun because there was gangbangers that went to my school. So I went up to him like, hey, can you get me a gun? He's like, yeah, sure, get me an ounce of weed. And again, mid-90s, like $500 worth of drugs. So that was actually pretty easy. Went to my mom's house, stole an ounce of drugs off a guy sleeping on my mom's floor. Went to him and said, all right, here you go. He's like, all right, give me 3 days, I'll get you a gun.
Your friend got to you before you got to the gun.
Yes, yes. And got to me by the simplest, most human acts, by doing exactly what I just talked about, by not treating me like I was a project, by not treating me like I was broken, by like, dude, you're all right. Sit down, have a meal. You're okay. Watch this movie with me. What do you want to do today? We just have to let people know that they're okay. People just want to be people want to be listened and want to hear that they're okay.
Do you think that people knowing that they're okay would have stopped the number of shootings that we're seeing?
I think it would have at least stopped some. And like I said, even one's enough. Even stopping one's enough. Even stopping one person from wanting to hurt themselves right now is enough. Go one person at a time. I never ended up going to get the gun. I stayed at Mike's house the rest of that weekend and spent time with people who loved me.
Let me ask you this question, Johnny. You had 150 volunteer teenage actors simulating a school shooting. What kind of feedback did you get during that shooting process?
What's happened after every single film set that we do, since these people are so young, they come to me and they tell me about their experience at school and how when they're at school and they hear a door shut loudly, they're scared that a shooting might occur, or that they pray in their car with their parents before they enter. And so everybody on set felt very empowered and good that they're working towards sharing a story and message of compassion and love for people.
So you feel that the people who you're trying to reach are reachable?
Yeah.
Oh, completely.
Everybody is reachable.
They're human.
There's a very small section that's going to follow through with the attacks, okay? They're actually going to follow through with it. Very, very small amount of people that are going to do that. There's a huge amount of people who are in that gray area, in that depressive spot that could, that think that they might, that think that maybe they should. There's a big amount of people in that area, and those are the ones that we can reach. Up until the minute you pull that trigger, you can be reached.
In a world that's suffering, any voice of hope is a beautiful thing, and that's what makes me feel good when I wake up in the morning, knowing that we all worked on this project. I'm sure it's what makes Aaron feel good. Any voice of hope is a great thing in today's world because there's a lot of people suffering.
I just want to help someone that's in that darkness find a way out of it. And if I can help one person find that, I'm going to keep on going the rest of my life.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
And Just Another Tuesday shows Friday night at the Museum of Photographic Arts at 6:10 and then again at 8:10. That's followed by a Q&A with Aaron Stark and Johnny Santana.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, 2 more witnesses shed light on the pressure campaign on Ukraine for investigations. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
The storm is moving out tonight, and it left some snow in our mountains. This is a snapshot from the Laguna Mountain Lodge. You can see some snow on the ground and wet roads earlier today. Sunshine returns this weekend with a bit of a warm-up. Lauren Rainson has our forecast.
We continue to track this mighty trough, very evident on the water vapor imagery, and of course that's been resulting in rain to Southern California. Snow in the highest elevations. Showers continue. They're pooling in from onshore in between Long Beach, right here into Chula Vista. Rainfall reports as of earlier this morning, several places have surpassed the 4-inch mark. San Diego International Airport, a little more than 0.6 of an inch, but you know what? We'll take that. Into the metro area as you're heading into tonight, we're going to lose the showers with just a few passing clouds. There will be a few lingering showers throughout the viewing area, though, because this trough continues to work its way out of the region. As a result, we'll trend much drier for tomorrow morning's commute. We'll even lose the clouds as you're getting back into Friday afternoon and the evening. We'll be left with just a few clouds Friday night into Saturday. Into your TGIF Friday, nothing but sunshine. Slightly cooler high temperatures overall, right about where we should be for this time of year. Our weekend outlook is trending us much quieter. We're getting back to those warmer temperatures once more. Along the coast with sunshine and seasonably cool highs in the lower 70s. We'll kick off the new work week, highs in the 60s. Take you inland with sunshine to dominate, highs in the upper 60s to the lower to the middle 70s. In the mountains with that chillier air, highs in the 40s to the 50s. But you will be soaking up all of that sunshine all weekend and into next week. Desert areas calling for abundant sunshine. Upper 60s on Friday. We'll bounce back to the lower to the middle 70s throughout the weekend. A beautiful fall weekend ahead. We'll kick off that new work and school week under plenty of sunshine. Highs in the middle 60s to the lower 70s. Not too shabby as the weather continues to quiet down for us. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Lauren Rainson. Back to you.
And even as the region gets some much needed rain this week, Tijuana is dealing with a severe water shortage, and it has led the city water utility to shut off water for days at a time. But KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler tells us the long, dry summer isn't what's behind the drastic measures to conserve water.
Water shutoffs aren't uncommon in the growing cities of Tijuana and Rosarito, which are home to over 1.5 million people. But they're rarely announced beforehand, and they're often isolated to certain neighborhoods after pipes or pumps fail. Earlier this month, however, Tijuana officials announced that it was planning wide-ranging shutoffs for the next 2 months in an attempt to replenish a vital reservoir that is perilously low. Jose Sanchez is a tech worker who lives in the Juarez neighborhood of Tijuana, whose water was shut off this week.
We have to just fill up buckets or those big barrels full of water and just try to live off that for a couple of days.
The shutoffs have been rotating around the city to different neighborhoods as the government tries to spread the burden of water conservation. The goal is for each neighborhood to have their water shut off for a 24-hour period, once every 5 days.
We can manage with not washing dishes, maybe ordering more takeout or taking showers with friends and family like I do, for example.
The vast majority of residents don't drink the water from the tap, but the shutoffs have already impacted the water use habits of Tijuana. Ruben Villavicencio Alvarez, who works as an engineer for the city's water utility, explains that's part of the idea behind the citywide shutoffs.
Estamos dando cuenta, la ciudadanía, nos incluimos.
He says that residents are realizing that by making small changes to their lifestyles, like taking shorter showers, the city can make a huge change to its water use. He says it's already seeing results.
Significativo.
But after an especially wet winter, why is Tijuana suddenly low on water? It has to do with where the city's water is coming from. Water is pumped from Mexicali over the mountains to here, El Carrizo Reservoir in the outskirts of Tijuana. It supplies most of the water for Tijuana and Rosarito. Right now, it's at just 15% of capacity.
More than 90% of the water in the coastal zone, and that would be Rosarito and Tijuana and Tecate, comes from the Colorado River.
SDSU professor Paul Ganster has studied water use along the border for decades. The water first crosses into Mexico to the west of Mexicali, where it's used mostly for agriculture, and to reach the reservoir has to be pumped uphill through an aqueduct system over the Sierra Juarez. It's that trip that has left Tijuana dry.
It's a thin lifeline. It's one that is vulnerable to a number of things.
Over the past few months, a series of pump failures has limited the supply of water over the mountains to Tijuana. On top of that, agricultural interests in the Mexicali Valley have upped their consumption of water during the hot, dry summer. For example, this truck is being filled up with 32,000 liters of water for a farm. As a result, the water in the local reservoirs have dropped below a level where water can be efficiently processed.
The normal intake is actually not at the bottom of the reservoir, but up some distance above that in order not to suck in a lot of sediments and so on. So if they don't have water to put into the system, they just, they're stuck.
The water crisis in Baja coincides with the change in government from the conservative PAN party, which had ruled the state for 30 years, to the Ascendant Morena party, which in a few years has seized power across the country on the promise to crack down on corruption. Morena officials lay the blame for the water shortage on the previous administration, pointing at millions of missing pesos that were supposed to go towards improved infrastructure.
And the infrastructure is not up to it.
Jose Sanchez, the tech worker who's filling up buckets every few days, says part of the city's candor about the water shortage can be chalked up to not being directly responsible for the current problem.
People are angry at the situation. They're not yet angry at the new government. Maybe a year from now that's going to change. It depends on their tone, depends on how they handle everything.
With Tijuana continuing to grow, water conservation is going to become vital. And if a rare wet winter can still lead to a shortage, Tijuana has little time to prepare for the West Coast's longer and more frequent droughts as part of our changing climate. In Tijuana, Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
A new California law that requires President Trump and others to disclose their tax returns is now blocked. The state Supreme Court says the law violates the state constitution and that such a requirement would have to come from voters. Governor Gavin Newsom signed the bill into law in July. President Trump has been criticized by Democrats over his taxes. It's been tradition, though not required, for candidates to make them public. A major gift to Rady Children's Hospital is coming from two familiar names. Today, the hospital announced a $200 million donation from Ernest and Evelyn Rady. The hospital was named after them in 2006. This is their third large donation and the biggest one yet. Hospital staff will raise matching funds to plan a major redevelopment and expansion in the coming years. Mice have been getting drunk at the Salk Institute in San Diego. KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani spoke to the scientists behind the study out today, which looks at why some animals and people might become compulsive alcohol drinkers.
At a Salk Institute lab in La Jolla, scientist Kay Tai says she's been thinking about an open bar.
If you had an event and there was a reception with an open bar, you know, everybody's lining up to drink at the open bar. And then at some point, the open bar closes and it becomes a cash bar. And some people stop drinking. Some people keep drinking. And then at some point, the cash bar closes and then people need to find like another bar. How many negative consequences are you willing to endure to continue to seek the reward? And that is really what we're looking at with compulsion.
Compulsion is the habit of continuously seeking a reward despite negative consequences, like paying for a drink when you've already had enough free ones. To find out why some people do this more than others, she and her team of researchers took images of brain activity in mice when they drink.
We wanted to know, what are these neurons doing at the first time that mice experience alcohol, all the way through the development of compulsive alcohol drinking.
Upon exposure to alcohol, mice that experienced increased brain activity could stop drinking. But those with less brain activity continued to seek alcohol, despite a painful shock to the foot or a yucky taste given to the hooch.
They're all raised in the same cages with the same light cycle, the same food, all that stuff. So both the genetic differences and the environmental differences are very, very small. So the genetic pool, it's an inbred mouse strain. They're not clones of each other, but it's an inbred mouse strain. So they're all sort of like related. And environmentally, they're all growing up in the lab. So that was really surprising to us to see this amount of genetic variability.
Ty says the research shows people may develop compulsive drinking habits for many reasons, not just genetics or the environment. Shalina Chatlani, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom, a new addition to the San Diego Zoo Safari Park as it welcomes a species from down under. And on Midday Edition, the cost of living in South Bay, why rents are increasing in Imperial Beach. And as always, you can find tonight's stories on our website. That's kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.